Hey guys, what's up? Spectre here. Hardsuit Labs and Paradox Interactive have made waves recently by unveiling the first of 5 factions vying for control of Seattle. We've also got a few other stories breaking in the wake of Gamescom, so without further ado, let's jump in. The official Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 Twitter account released a single image along with a description earlier today. In it, they give us our first glance at the pioneers and a bit of background, saying, "We made this city and we will never let anyone forget that." Lou Grand, Pioneers' leader, first of the 5 Seattle factions to be unveiled, Pioneers are fighting to preserve whatever remains of their old world and one another. Clicking through the included link brings you to the factions page of the game's official site, reading, "In Seattle, 5 major factions, groups of vampires who have united under a single banner, are all vying for control, each with their own history, characteristics, and motivation. It will be up to you to decide who to join, cross, or pit against each other, but know that your choices will carry consequences." So it seems that we will not only be navigating the politics and conflicts between clans themselves, but also those of the factions fighting for the future of Seattle. They're also once again reminding us about the weight and consequences of our choices, which brings us to our next story. Cara Ellison, the game's senior narrative designer, took to the game's blog to deliver a developer update, this time about the writing process behind Bloodlines 2. In the lengthy, in-depth post, she explains the ways in which this sequel stays true to the original Bloodlines, but also how it will differentiate itself from other RPGs rapidly crowding the space. Apparently, Bloodlines 2 will remain true to its roots by playing up the shadowy politics of the World of Darkness. Territory will be incredibly important in a way that is often lost in other titles. Players will at times feel claustrophobic as their enemies encroach from all sides of the city, politically and maybe even literally speaking. Allison also reminds players that we are not the heroes of some grand tale. We are one piece in a larger game, and those that we choose to rope in, such as humans, will probably share some grim fate, either at our own hands or those of our enemies, even if we roll a well-intentioned character. She went on to say, "In Bloodlines 1, and therefore Bloodlines 2, you cannot achieve anything without hurting people or making them angry. You can only choose who you hurt. You can choose between one vampire political reality or another. Everything is seen through vampire eyes. When you're immortal, you don't work on mortal time. The politics are long-term. You have to stay undead and stay powerful, and in order to do that, you have to start manipulating." All of this to say that you will be making many choices throughout your playthrough, and you'll have to see just how the consequences of your choices play out. But just how varied will those choices be? Well, Gamescom 2019 has come and gone, leaving some new Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 gameplay in its wake. Well, sort of. The mission showed off is the same one that we saw at E3, and its gameplay I've already broken down. And if you've been watching my videos for a while now, you know that I stray away from making frivolous content just for the sake of clicks. So I thought I'd turn this new-ish footage into something useful by showing the points in the mission where different choices are made, and just how that affects the outcome, as that can give us a glimpse at just how varied the game's story could be once it sees the light of day. Or, well, it doesn't. I mean, it's a vampire game. But anyway, let's take a look. For those of you who may have missed the video, or who just need a quick refresher, the mission in question has us meeting up with Aleph, a contact that tasks us with finding another mysterious character by the name of Slug, in order to purchase or coerce some information out of him. Along the way, there are distinct choices to be made, as well as different strategies that can be employed in both combat and world traversal. The first part where these demos diverge is in a conversation with a Nosferatu middleman. In the E3 demo, he doesn't take too kindly to the polite demeanor of the player. The difference here is thin, however, as the conversation quickly gets back onto the rails. This sewer-dwelling NPC tries to get the player to convince Slug to return to the protection of the Nosferatu. In the E3 demo, this offer is outright refused, and in the other, it's accepted, giving the player a new optional quest step. Next, we can see 2 different powers being used on the same enemies loitering in a parking lot. In the E3 demo, nebulation powers are used, whereas in the Gamescom demo, Skewer, a thaumaturgy skill, is used. And it seems much more effective, illustrating different combat styles. As I mentioned before, there are also different traversal strategies available in the game. In the E3 demo, the player walks directly into Lurk's den, confronting him and eventually having to fight a large group of enemies. In the Gamescom demo, our guide looks for another ventilation system and, using nebulation, turns into a cloud of vapor in order to unlock a more stealthy entry point, proceeding to take out the rabble silently, bypassing the entire confrontation with Lurk and his goons. On to our eventual meeting with Slug. In the E3 demo, the player takes a much more direct approach to conversation, which ends up in a quick skirmish as Slug tries to run away. In the Gamescom demo, however, Slug actually empathizes with the player, who is after all just a fresh thin blood in a city filled with treacherous vampires. Eventually, the conversation goes back on the rails and the skirmish ensues anyway, after which the player can kill Slug or spare his life. In the E3 demo, Slug meets the Salt Shaker, but in the Gamescom demo, he's spared, helping the player maintain more humanity and also helping to recover the info that they were sent for in the first place, influencing the quest's outcome. As in the E3 demo, the player actually returns to Ylif unsuccessful, having killed Slug and not gathered the information needed, resulting in a somewhat menacing threat about the pyramid paying them a visit. However, in the Gamescom gameplay, they are successful, prompting an invitation to work together again. Those are the main differences between each playthrough. I didn't find them to be particularly exhaustive, but to be fair, the people playing these demos made mostly similar choices, as there were quite a few other options that we didn't get to see. In terms of dialogue, I didn't find that too varied either, but to be fair, anytime you replay a conversation in a game with branching dialogue, the proverbial strings behind the curtain begin to show, as they all have to boil down to the same few lines eventually. But as I said in my last video on the subject, this is all pre-alpha gameplay, and we should temper our expectations accordingly. But that's it for this Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 update. For more on this RPG and others like Cyberpunk 2077, make sure to subscribe, and as always, thanks for watching, guys.